Hello, everyone. Today, I'm going to present from Agile ground to aerial navigation, learning from learned hallucination. This work is accomplished at Learning Agent Research Group and Autonomous System Group at the University of Texas at Austin. So let's begin with the background. So the target of this work is to navigate in highly constrained environments. However, in those environments, classical methods will break down because they require more computation and often cannot come up with real-time solutions. For example, sampling-based method will require more samples to find feasible solutions, or optimization-based method will require more optimization iteration and can even stuck in local minima. Instead, learning methods are pretty fast. However, they require some good quality training data. For example, if we use imitation learning, collecting demonstration in those environments are pretty hard. Or if we use reinforcement learning, that will require a lot of trial and error, and they are dangerous. However, if we just put the robot in an open space, it's pretty safe for it to perform some agile maneuvers. And those agile maneuvers actually can be optimal for some highly constrained environments. In that case, one question is, can we hallucinate obstacles that make those maneuvers optimal? For example, taking a turn like that is not optimal in open space, but adding an obstacle here, of course, makes it optimal. So, if we can hallucinate such obstacles, then open space can just become cheap training data for learning methods. Follow this inspiration, we have a series of work learning from hallucination. From this open space motion plan, we can either hallucinate most constrained obstacle, for example, in this case, obstacles are everywhere except for on the path, or we can hallucinate minimal obstacle. That is, the minimal obstacle that makes this path optimal, and plus some additional obstacles around, not on the path. However, this method has some drawbacks. For example, for the minimal one, it requires human expert to put a lot of efforts into design. For example, it took us several weeks to do a lot of tuning tasks. And also for this, they often only work for a very short landing horizon. For example, they just need 1 meter landing horizon. So instead, we come up with this learning from learned hallucination that use self-supervised learning to hallucinate obstacles, because that's flexible with robot tasks and also with a long planning horizon, for example, as we show here. So let's go into the detail of our method. So learning from learned hallucination actually has two parts. The first part is to learn how to hallucinate. So let's begin with the hallucinator here. The main function we use, or the main function we learn, that's trying to hallucinate obstacles. It will just take the motion plan, open space motion plan as input, which is a time series of position and velocity, and trying to hallucinate the obstacle distribution. So here you can actually assume any form of obstacles like walkthrough. But here, for simplicity, we'll assume obstacles are ellipse or ellipsoid for either 2D or 3D navigation. Then in that case, the output is normal distribution of obstacle location and size. And for the hallucinator, we parameterize as a neural network. To train that, we need to reconstruct the motion plan. So here we use a classical motion planner. That goal of it is to find the optimal motion plan given the obstacle configuration. So the input is a sampled obstacle configuration from this distribution, which are represented as location and size of ellipse or ellipsoid. And the output is an optimal motion plan. It's again in the format of time series of position and velocity. However, one thing to notice is that since we use a classical motion planner here, so it has no parameters to learn. Also, we use the classical motion planner here. That doesn't necessarily mean we can also use that for creating demonstration because, as we mentioned, classical motion planner will be slow in this highly constrained environment. However, it still will be good enough for us for the training purpose. Finally, how we are going to let the hallucinator learn to hallucinate meaningful obstacles. We will train it with a reconstruction loss between this open space motion plan and also this motion plan computed by the classical planner. So why that case? The logic is that first, this plan is optimal given this obstacle configuration because that's computed by the classical planner. And then if the reconstruction loss is 0, it means open space motion plan is the same as this plan. That means the open space motion plan is optimal for the obstacle configuration. What does that say? That means the encoder takes open space motion plan and generate an obstacle configuration that makes the open space motion plan optimal. And that's exactly our goal for Hallucinator. Finally, for this, to use this reconstruction loss, we need to let gradient to computable gradient through this classical planner. For that purpose, we use a differentiable optimization-based planner. However, we don't mean to restrict the type of classical planner here, because if even you want to use a non-differentiable planner, you can still use approximate gradient method to finish the training. So that's our first part, learning how to hallucinate. For the second part, the goal is learning the motion planning or learnable motion planner. So the first part is that since we have after we train the hallucinator, we will let it still take the open space motion plan and to generate the hallucinated obstacle configuration. Since it's a distribution, we can actually sample a lot of obstacle configuration from that. And then also, since the robot will, during deployment, cannot know the exact location of the size of the obstacle. Instead, we'll just use some sensor to observe obstacles. So one important step is to render the observation for the robot. For example, if the robot is going to use LiDAR here, you can use recast to render those LiDAR scans. So after we have the robot perception or obstacle perception, we also have the open space motion plan as a demonstration. Now we can train a learnable motion planner. And since it's a learning-based method, it will be fast during deployment. So that's why we have the fast team. So that's an overview of our method. So first, we're learning the hallucination using a reconstruction loss. And from that, we can generate a lot of cheap data and render it to observation. And again, using the open space motion plan as a demonstration, we can learn a fast motion planner for deployment. To test our method, we first evaluate it on 2D navigation. We use this ClearPath Gecko with LiDAR as observation. We test it both on physical world and simulated world. The baseline to compare with is DW Planner, which is the default planner on this robot, and also two hallucination methods we mentioned before, both constraint one and the minimal hallucination. For the training data, that's basically the open space motion plan. We collect it with very maximum speed because due to, if you remember, previous method has assumption on planning horizon. So as a result, they can just learn from data set up to certain maximum velocity. For example, most constraint one can only learn up to 0.4, and the minimal one can learn up to 1 meter per second. Our learning method is flexible to that, so we let it learn 2 meters per second, and in fact, it can learn with even larger maximum velocity. So here we show the results. In the simulated experiment, we run it on 300 environments of different difficulty levels and calculated the average traversal time. For the default planner, it has longest traversal time, and compared with learn from hallucination method, it runs much slower. So as we improve against hallucination method, and as they can learn from data set with larger maximum speed, you can see the traversal time gradually reduce. And finally, the learning from learned hallucination achieve optimal or best traversal time. For the physical world here, we just compare each method with their maximum velocity. And again, without surprise, learning from learned hallucination achieve best traversal time. Then to test whether our method can generalize to other robots, we try it in this 3D navigation, where the robot is a UAV, unmanned aerial vehicle, or the drone. We test it in this simulated environment, where the blue parts are just the obstacles. One thing to notice here is the obstacles, the blue parts, they are actually not walls. They are more like a cloud. So there are a lot of holes inside that where the robot can get through. And also the observation here, or the sensor here for the robot is the depth image. So the baseline, since previous hallucination methods are more tailored or laborious designed for specific robots, and they have short planning horizon, so they cannot work for this fast agile 3D navigation. So we leave out them. Instead, we compare against state-of-the-art classical motion planner, Ego planner. The data set, in theory, we should collect open space motion plan. However, we found it's hard for a random policy to cover all necessary navigation skills. So instead, we just let the Ego planner collect the trajectory using Ego planner in a different obstacle course. And the task is to test in this course, and we let each method to keep navigating to random generated goal until they collect with certain obstacles. And after that, we can compare against survival distance, survival time, or path optimality, which is measured by success weighted by path. So here are the results. We can see our method's survival actually longer, both in distance and also time. But we perform worse in the path optimality. And that's understandable. It's hard for learning method to often to achieve best path optimality. And here we also show some qualitative results. So remember, the blue obstacles are not walls, they have holes that the drone can come in through. And here is the depth image. You can see how it stored the obstacles along the way. For example, taking a right turn here to dodge the obstacle on the left, and similar here. So due to time limit, we cannot show the full video here. Finally, for the future work, one important thing is, of course, we want to test for the 3D navigation task. We want to train our method with really some random policy rather than data collected by the Ego planner. However, to do that, we need to design good exploration policy to cover all necessary navigation skills. And another thing is that in this work, we only test navigation with static obstacles. It's interesting to test if our method can be applied to dynamic obstacle as well. Thanks, that's all my presentation. And you can access our paper here by scanning this QR code.